With her husband's blood still warm on Comanche blades, pregnant Sarah Thornton faced certain death until the chief's son made an impossible choice that shattered centuries of tribal law. Running Eagle's protection sparked a forbidden love that would either unite two warring worlds or destroy them both. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The last light of day painted the Texas horizon in shades of amber and blood, a fitting sky for what was to come. Sarah Thornton stood at the edge of her small vegetable garden, one hand resting on the swell of her belly, the other shielding her eyes from the setting sun. 6 months with child and miles from the nearest neighbor, she felt the baby kick as if sensing her unease. Something wasn't right. The chickens had gone quiet too early, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "James!" she called, turning toward the barn where her husband had been mending tools since midday. No answer came across the dusty yard, only silence, heavy and expectant. At 26, Sarah was no stranger to the harshness of frontier life. 5 years ago, she'd left behind the comforts of Boston to follow James west, trading silk ribbons for calloused hands and society parties for endless work. Yet she had never regretted it. James Thornton was a good man, gentle with her, excited about their coming child, determined to build something lasting on this unforgiving land. She took a step toward the barn when she heard it, the distant thunder of hooves. Not the measured pace of a single rider or the familiar gait of her husband's mare. This was the rumble of many horses, approaching fast. "James!" she called again, this time with urgency piercing her voice. He emerged from the barn, rifle already in hand, his face grim in the fading light. "Sarah, get inside, now!" She knew what this meant, the Comanche. Stories of raids had traveled along the scattered homesteads like wildfire. Settlements burned, men killed, women taken. James reached her in 3 long strides, his hand gripping her arm almost painfully. "Bar the door. Use the shotgun if you have to." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear, not for himself, but for her and their unborn child. Sarah wanted to cling to him, to beg him to come inside with her, but she knew he wouldn't. James Thornton would defend what was his until his last breath. She pressed her lips to his quickly, tasting the salt of his skin, then turned and ran toward their small cabin as fast as her pregnant body would allow. Behind her, she heard James chambering around in his rifle. The riders came over the rise just as she reached the door. 15, maybe 20 warriors, their faces painted for war, feathers and beads adorning their long black hair. At their lead rode a younger man, tall and powerfully built, his chest bare except for the red handprint painted over his heart. Even at this distance, she could see the intensity of his gaze as he surveyed the homestead. Running Eagle felt the familiar surge of power as they crested the hill. Below lay another settler's cabin, another intrusion on Comanche lands, another place where buffalo no longer roamed because white men had fenced the earth as if they could own the ground beneath the sky. His father, Chief Thundercloud, had been clear. These encroachments could no longer be tolerated. Every homestead burned was a message. Every settler turned away was protection for the tribe. He raised his arm, signaling the warriors to spread out. This would be quick. The lone white man standing before the barn had courage. Running Eagle would grant him that. But courage would not save him, not against 20 Comanche warriors riding with the fury of generations of wrongs fueling their hearts. "For the people!" Running Eagle shouted in Comanche, urging his horse forward, leading the charge down the slope. The white man got off 2 shots. The first went wide. The second caught Whitehawk in the shoulder, causing him to fall from his mount with a cry of pain. Then the warriors were upon him, and though he fought with the desperation of a cornered wolf, the outcome was never in doubt. Running Eagle dismounted. watching as two warriors finished the settler with quick thrusts of their knives. He turned his attention to the cabin. There would be supplies inside, ammunition, food, perhaps weapons. He gestured for Wolf Brother and Tall Reed to approach the door. That's when he heard it, a woman's scream from inside, followed by the blast of a shotgun through the thin wooden door. Wolf Brother fell back, clutching his leg where the buckshot had torn through muscle and bone. Running Eagle approached cautiously, signaling the others to surround the cabin. Another settler woman, another difficult choice. Some of the warriors would want to take her back to the camp. Others would say it was cleaner to kill her. Neither sat well with him, though he would never admit such thoughts to his father or the tribal elders. "Burn it," he commanded in Comanche. "Smoke her out." The warriors moved quickly, gathering dry hay from the barn, setting torches to the wooden walls of the cabin. Soon flames licked up the sides of the structure and smoke began to seep through the cracks. When the door finally burst open, Running Eagle was not prepared for what emerged. The woman stumbled out, coughing, one hand clutching a shotgun, the other wrapped protectively around her swollen belly. Her face was streaked with soot, her blue eyes wide with terror and fury, but it was her condition that gave Running Eagle pause. She was heavy with child, a new life growing within her. In that moment, as their eyes met across the yard, something shifted in Running Eagle's understanding of his purpose. He had led raids before, had killed men who encroached on Comanche territory, but never had he faced a woman about to bring life into the world. Among his people, expectant mothers were sacred, protected at all costs. The flames rose higher behind her, and Running Eagle saw the other warriors moving in, weapons ready. In their eyes, she was just another settler, her condition meaningless in the face of generations of conflict. Running Eagle made his decision in the heartbeat between breaths. He stepped forward, raising his hand to halt the warriors. "This one is under my protection," he declared in Comanche, his voice carrying the authority of the chief's son. "By our most sacred laws, we do not harm those who carry life." Confusion rippled through the war party. Black Knife, the eldest among them, stepped forward. "She is white. Her child is white. They are not of the people." "All life is sacred," Running Eagle responded, though he knew his words stretched the boundaries of tribal custom. "I claim the right of protection." As the warriors hesitated, uncertain how to proceed, Sarah Thornton collapsed to her knees, the shotgun falling from her grasp, her strength finally giving way to exhaustion and smoke. Running Eagle moved toward her, knowing that in this moment he was altering the course of many lives, including his own. The warriors' faces hardened with disbelief as Running Eagle approached the fallen woman. Black Knife, his father's most trusted warrior, stepped forward with a hand raised in protest. "The chief's son forgets himself," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the crackling of the flames. "This woman's people have taken our hunting grounds, poisoned our water, slaughtered our buffalo. Her husband's blood is still warm on our blades." Running Eagle did not turn as he knelt beside Sarah. Her breathing was labored, her face pale beneath the soot, the heat from the burning cabin pressed against his back like an accusation. "I have not forgotten who I am," he replied, keeping his voice steady. "Nor have I forgotten our ways. The people do not harm those who carry new life. That law is for Comanche women," Black Knife spat. "Not white invaders." Sarah's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Running Eagle with a mixture of terror and confusion. She tried to scramble away, but her body betrayed her, too weak from the smoke and the strain of carrying her child. A pained gasp escaped her lips as she clutched her belly. "The child stirs within her," Running Eagle said, loud enough for all to hear. "I invoke the sacred protection. Any who challenge this answer to me and to the spirits who watch over all life." A murmur rippled through the warriors. To challenge a sacred protection was unthinkable, even when invoked by unorthodox means. Yet to leave a white woman alive, especially one who had witnessed their faces, was equally troubling. "Your father will hear of this," Black Knife warned, his fingers tightening around his knife handle. "I count on it," Running Eagle replied, not breaking his gaze from the warriors. "Now go, take what supplies you need, but this woman remains under my protection." For a long moment, it seemed Black Knife might defy him. Then the older warrior turned sharply, barking orders to the others. The raid would continue, but without Running Eagle and without the satisfaction of a complete victory. As the war party gathered their horses and the meager supplies from the homestead, Running Eagle turned his attention back to Sarah. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too, a fierce will to survive, for herself and for her unborn child. "You speak English?" she managed, her voice barely audible over the fire's roar. Running Eagle nodded. "Mission school, 3 winters." He kept his words simple, direct. "Your husband is dead. I am sorry." Sarah's face crumpled at the confirmation of what she already knew. A sob escaped her lips, but she quickly pressed her hand to her mouth, as if afraid to show weakness before her enemy. "Why?" she whispered. "Why save me when your men killed James?" Running Eagle glanced at her swollen belly. "The child, among my people, one who carries life, is sacred." A bitter laugh, sharp with grief, escaped her. "And after the baby comes, what then?" Running Eagle had no answer. He had acted on instinct, on a sense of right that transcended the hatred between their peoples. But he had not thought beyond this moment, had not considered what saving her would mean in the days to come. The sound of hoofbeats drew his attention. The war party was leaving, several casting dark glances over their shoulders. Black Knife's stare lingered longest, a promise of trouble to come. "Can you stand?" Running Eagle asked, returning his focus to Sarah. She nodded uncertainly, allowing him to help her to her feet. The cabin was now fully engulfed in flames, illuminating the yard where her husband's body lay still and broken. Sarah turned away, unable to look. "My horse," Running Eagle said, guiding her toward the painted stallion that stood waiting at the edge of the firelight. "We must go before others come." "Go where?" Sarah demanded, suddenly pulling away from his grasp. "I won't be your prisoner. I'd rather die here with James." Running Eagle recognized the desperation in her voice, the reckless courage born of grief. "Not prisoner," he said firmly. "Protected. The raiders will tell others what happened here. Both my people and yours will hunt us now." The realization seemed to hit Sarah all at once. She had lost everything. Her husband, her home, her place in the world. All that remained was the child within her, and this impossible choice. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice steadier now, though tears still streaked her soot-stained face. Running Eagle met her gaze directly. "Because I have already betrayed my father's trust to keep you alive," he extended his hand. "Now choose life or death for you and your child." Sarah looked back at the burning ruins of her life, at the body of the man she had loved. Then she placed her trembling hand in Running Eagle's and allowed him to help her onto his horse. As they rode away from the homestead, Sarah clung to Running Eagle's back, her forehead pressed between his shoulder blades. He felt her tears soaking through his skin, but she made no sound. He guided his horse north toward the canyon lands where even the most skilled Comanche trackers would struggle to find them. The night wrapped around them like a blanket, hiding their passage from curious eyes. Running Eagle knew the land intimately, every hidden spring, every sheltered overhang, every narrow pass that could provide sanctuary. By dawn, they would be miles from the raid site, in territory too rugged for casual pursuit. But distance alone would not save them. He had broken with his people in a way that could never be mended. The chief's son, heir to leadership of the tribe, had chosen to protect an enemy over standing with his warriors. Even if his father could eventually forgive such a transgression, the tribal council never would. And the woman, Sarah, what of her? Running Eagle glanced back at her pale face, now slack with exhaustion. She had lost consciousness, her body slumped against his. Only his arm, wrapped securely around her waist, kept her from falling. For now, all that mattered was keeping her alive. The deeper questions of why he had risked everything for a white woman, of what would happen when her child was born, of how they could possibly survive in a world where both their peoples would hunt them, those would have to wait. The horse picked its way carefully through the darkness, carrying its double burden toward an uncertain future. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of human lives. Running Eagle whispered a prayer to the night sky, asking not for forgiveness, but for strength. Behind them, the glow of the burning homestead faded into the distance, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. There would be no going back for either of them, only forward into the unknown. Dawn broke over the canyon lands in ribbons of pale gold and lavender. Running Eagle had ridden through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest his horse or to ensure Sarah remained secure across the saddle. She had drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring her husband's name in moments of clarity before slipping back into the merciful oblivion of exhaustion. As the first light touched the red stone walls of the canyon, Running Eagle guided his horse through a narrow passage barely visible among the tumbled boulders. The path twisted sharply, requiring intimate knowledge of its contours to navigate safely. After several tight turns, it opened suddenly into a hidden valley, a secret place known to few outside his family line. A small stream cut through the center, fed by an underground spring that ensured water even in the driest seasons. Cottonwoods and willows clustered along its banks, offering shade and shelter. The high walls provided protection from both the elements and prying eyes. "Sarah," Running Eagle said softly, touching her arm, "we have arrived." She stirred against him, blinking in confusion at the unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, her face remained peaceful, as if she had forgotten the events of the previous day. Then, memory returned, bringing with it a wave of anguish that transformed her features. "James," she whispered, her voice breaking on her husband's name. Running Eagle helped her down from the horse, steadying her as her legs trembled beneath her. He did not offer empty words of comfort. Among his people, grief was honored through presence, not platitudes. Sarah sank to the ground beside the stream, her body hunched over her swollen belly as if to protect the child within from the harshness of the world. Running Eagle allowed her this moment of private sorrow, turning instead to the practical matters of their survival. He unsaddled his horse, letting the animal drink and graze. From his saddlebags, he removed a small bundle of jerked meat, a water skin, and a folded blanket. Near the base of the canyon wall, a shallow overhang formed a natural shelter. Running Eagle had used this place many times during hunting trips or vision quests, leaving supplies cached in a small, dry cave nearby. After retrieving these additional provisions, dried corn, a cooking pot, a fire striker, and several cured hides, he returned to find Sarah washing her face in the stream. The cool water had removed much of the soot, revealing skin reddened by the fire's heat and eyes swollen from crying. "You should rest," he said, setting down his armload of supplies. "It is safe here." Sarah looked up at him, her expression hardening. "Safe. With the man who led the raid that killed my husband, Running Eagle met her gaze steadily. I did not strike the killing blow. Does that matter? Her voice rose, echoing slightly against the canyon walls. You brought them there. You... She broke off, a grimace of pain crossing her face as she pressed a hand to her side. Alarm flashed through Running Eagle. The child. Sarah took several deep breaths. Her eyes closed. After a moment, she nodded, just kicking, strongly. A bitter smile touched her lips. He has his father's strength. Running Eagle knelt beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. You need food, water, rest. The baby needs these things too. He gestured to the overhang. There is shelter there. I will make a fire. Sarah stared at him, conflict evident in her blue eyes. Pride warred with necessity, grief with survival instinct. Finally, she nodded, allowing him to help her to her feet and guide her to the shelter. The day passed in uneasy silence. Running Eagle built a small, smokeless fire, prepared a simple meal of corn and jerky softened in water, and then set about making the shelter more comfortable with the hides and blankets. Sarah ate little but drank deeply from the water skin. Her body's needs overrode her resistance. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the canyon floor, Sarah finally spoke again. What will happen now? She asked, her voice steadier than before. Running Eagle, who had been fashioning a bow from a supple branch, looked up. We wait until the child comes. And then he hesitated. The truth was, he had no clear plan beyond ensuring her safe delivery. His impulsive decision to protect her had severed him from his tribe as surely as a knife cuts a bowstring. Then we decide, he said finally, together. Sarah's expression revealed her skepticism. Why did you really save me? The truth, not some story about respecting life. Running Eagle set aside the half-finished bow. How could he explain what he himself did not fully understand? The moment he had seen her emerge from the burning cabin, something had shifted within him, a recognition, perhaps, that the simple divisions of Comanche and white, enemy and friend, were inadequate to capture the complexity of human existence. My father's father's father fought the Spanish, he began slowly. His son fought the Mexicans. My father fights the Americans. Always fighting, always losing more. Land, buffalo, people. He met her eyes directly. I am tired of death. Sarah's gaze did not waver. Your people killed my husband. Yes, Running Eagle acknowledged. And your people killed many of mine. Will more death heal these wounds? Before she could respond, a distant sound caught his attention, the faint cry of a hawk, distinctive but somehow wrong for this time of day. Not a bird at all, but a signal. Running Eagle moved quickly to the entrance of the canyon, climbing with practiced ease up a series of handholds in the rock face until he reached a vantage point overlooking the surrounding terrain. In the distance, he could make out a small group of riders, their silhouettes unmistakably Comanche. The search had begun sooner than he expected. Black Knife must have returned directly to the village rather than continuing the raid. Running Eagle's betrayal would have enraged his father, prompting an immediate response. When he returned to the shelter, Sarah read the concern in his face. "They're looking for us," she said. "It wasn't a question. My father's warriors," Running Eagle confirmed. "They will not find this place easily, but we must be careful. No fires after dark. No leaving the canyon. And if they do find us..." Sarah's hand moved protectively to her belly. Running Eagle checked his knife, ensuring it was secure at his waist. "Then I will do what I must." As darkness fell, bringing with it the chill of the desert night, Running Eagle maintained his vigil at the canyon entrance. Behind him, Sarah had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her breathing deep and regular in sleep. Under the vast canopy of stars, Running Eagle contemplated the path that had led him here. He had been raised to one day lead his people, to preserve their way of life against the relentless encroachment of the white settlers. Yet here he was, protecting a white woman against his own tribe, guided by an inner voice that seemed to transcend the ancient hatreds. His father would call him traitor. The tribal elders would say he had been bewitched. But as Running Eagle watched the steady rise and fall of Sarah's chest, the gentle curve of her belly where new life grew, he knew he could not have chosen differently. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation or permanent exile, peaceful resolution or violent confrontation, he would face it without regret. For in saving Sarah, he had perhaps also saved something within himself, some core of humanity that the endless cycle of violence had threatened to destroy. The days blended into weeks as spring strengthened its hold on the canyon. Each sunrise brought new wildflowers pushing through the rocky soil. Each sunset painted the stone walls with deepening hues of amber and crimson. For Sarah and Running Eagle, time seemed suspended in this hidden place, stretching between what had been and what was yet to come. Sarah's belly grew rounder, her movements more deliberate. The child within her kicked with increasing strength, a reminder of both her loss and her purpose. During those first days, she spoke little, spending hours staring at the stream or methodically combing her hair with her fingers, the repetitive motion seeming to calm her troubled thoughts. Running Eagle kept a respectful distance, understanding that grief requires space to breathe. He hunted small game, rabbits and quail that could be taken silently with bow and arrow, and gathered edible plants from the canyon floor. Twice he left at night to check their surroundings, returning with the news that search parties continued to comb the area, though none had ventured near their hidden refuge. On the 10th day, Sarah broke her silence as Running Eagle returned with a pair of rabbits slung over his shoulder. "Teach me," she said, her voice rough from disuse. Running Eagle paused, uncertain of her meaning. "Teach you what?" "Everything. How to make fire without matches, which plants are safe to eat, how to move silently." Her blue eyes, still shadowed with sorrow but clearer now, met his directly. "If this child and I are to survive, I need to know these things." Something shifted in Running Eagle's chest, respect perhaps for this woman's resilience. He nodded and gestured for her to join him as he prepared to skin the rabbits. Thus began a new phase of their shared existence. Each day, Running Eagle shared a piece of his knowledge: how to identify medicinal plants, how to set snares, how to read the weather in the shape of clouds. Sarah proved an apt pupil, her hands quickly growing skilled at tasks that had once been foreign to her. In turn, she began to share pieces of herself. She spoke of Boston, of books and music, of the society she had willingly left behind to follow James westward. She described the ocean, which Running Eagle had never seen, with such vivid detail that he could almost taste the salt air. "Why did you leave such a place?" he asked one evening as they sat by the small fire, watching the flames dance in the gathering darkness. Sarah's hand moved to her belly, a gesture that had become automatic. "For love," she said simply. "James had dreams of building something of his own, away from his family's shipping business. I had dreams of adventure." A sad smile touched her lips. "Both of us found more than we bargained for." Running Eagle nodded, understanding the power of dreams to reshape lives. "My father dreamed I would lead our people after him," he said, poking at the fire with a stick. "Now that will never happen. Do you regret it?" Sarah asked, studying his face in the firelight. Running Eagle considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain my choice has caused my father, but the choice itself..." He shook his head. "No, it was the right path, even if a difficult one." As April gave way to May, the search parties became less frequent, though Running Eagle remained vigilant. The canyon provided for their needs, the stream offered water and occasional fish, the surrounding vegetation yielded berries and roots, and Running Eagle's hunting skills ensured they did not go hungry. Sarah's body continued its transformation, preparing for the life it would soon bring forth. Running Eagle found himself fascinated by the process, so mysterious and yet so fundamental. Among his people, men were not typically involved in matters of childbirth, but here, in their isolation, traditional boundaries held less meaning. One afternoon, as Sarah rested in the shade of a cottonwood, she suddenly gasped, her hands flying to her belly. Running Eagle was at her side in an instant. The baby! "He's moving so much today," she said, wincing slightly. Then, making a decision, she reached for Running Eagle's hand and placed it against the swell of her stomach. Running Eagle froze, startled by the intimacy of the gesture. Then he felt it, a strong, purposeful push against his palm, as if the child within were reaching out to make contact. The sensation sent a jolt through him, a connection to something profound and ancient. "He will be strong," Running Eagle said softly, his hand still resting lightly on her belly. "Like his father," Sarah replied, but her eyes remained on Running Eagle's face. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Running Eagle gently withdrew his hand, uncomfortable with the sudden awareness of boundaries crossed. That night, as the stars emerged in the vast Texas sky, Sarah approached where Running Eagle sat, keeping watch at the canyon entrance. "I've been thinking about names," she said, easing herself down beside him. "If it's a boy, I want to call him William, after my grandfather." Running Eagle nodded, though the name felt strange on his tongue. "What would you call him?" Sarah asked unexpectedly. "In your language, I mean." The question caught him off guard. Naming was significant among the Comanche, a sacred responsibility not taken lightly. That she would consider a Comanche name for her child spoke of a trust he had not realized was building between them. "Perhaps Tabananica," he said after a moment. "It means sunray, for the light he brings even in dark times." Sarah repeated the name softly, stumbling slightly over the unfamiliar sounds. "Tabananica." She smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. "It's beautiful." Running Eagle felt something warm unfurl in his chest, like a seedling turning toward the sun. In this moment, miles from all they had known, surrounded by danger on all sides, they had created something new, a fragile understanding that transcended the blood-soaked history between their peoples. As May advanced, however, so did the reality of their situation. Sarah's time was approaching, and with it, decisions that could no longer be postponed. The child would need more than they could provide in this isolated canyon. And Running Eagle knew that despite the seeming quiet, danger still circled them like wolves around a wounded deer. The June heat settled over the canyon like a heavy blanket, bringing with it a tense anticipation that hung in the air alongside the buzzing of insects. Sarah's time was near. Her movements had slowed to a careful waddle, her face often tightening with practice contractions that Running Eagle had come to recognize in the subtle changes of her expression. "It will be soon," she said one morning, as Running Eagle helped her to sit beneath the cottonwood that had become her favorite resting place. "Perhaps today or tomorrow." Running Eagle nodded, his face betraying none of the concern that had been growing within him. Among the Comanche, childbirth was women's territory, sacred, mysterious, governed by rituals and knowledge passed from mother to daughter across generations. He had no place in such matters, no wisdom to offer, no right to witness the bringing forth of life. Yet here, in this isolated canyon, there was only him. "I have prepared as best I can," he said, gesturing to the pile of clean hides, the extra water he had collected, the medicinal plants he had gathered based on fragmented memories of his mother's teachings. "But I am not a midwife." Sarah's laugh held a tremor of fear beneath its forced lightness. "And I've never given birth before. We'll have to learn together." Running Eagle hesitated, then spoke the worry that had plagued him for days. "If something goes wrong..." "Don't," Sarah interrupted, placing her hand over his. The gesture, so natural now, would have been unthinkable weeks ago. "We'll face that if it comes. For now, this baby and I are counting on you, Running Eagle." The use of his name, which she had avoided for so long, struck him with unexpected force. He turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers interlacing briefly before he pulled away to continue his preparations. As the sun reached its zenith, Sarah's discomfort visibly increased. She paced the small clearing, pausing occasionally to brace herself against a tree trunk, her breath coming in measured gasps. Running Eagle watched anxiously, feeling more helpless than he had ever felt facing cavalry soldiers or rival warriors. By late afternoon, there was no more pretending. The labor had begun in earnest. Sarah's face glistened with sweat as she worked through contractions that came with increasing frequency. Running Eagle helped her to the shelter he had prepared, a space beneath the overhang, padded with the softest hides, sheltered from both sun and prying eyes. "Tell me what you need," he said, kneeling beside her. Sarah gripped his hand with surprising strength. Just stay, talk to me. Help me remember I'm not alone." And so he did. As the hours passed and Sarah's labor intensified, Running Eagle stayed beside her, offering water, wiping her brow, supporting her back when she needed to change positions. He spoke in a low, steady voice, sometimes in English, sometimes in Comanche, telling stories of his childhood, of the stars, of the ancient beings who had shaped the land around them. When the pain became too great for Sarah to bear silently, Running Eagle taught her the Comanche birth song, a melody meant to give strength to mother and child alike. Her voice, though strained, joined his in the ancient words, creating a harmony that seemed to fill the canyon with power. As night fell, bringing a blessed coolness to the air, Sarah's struggle reached its peak. Running Eagle had positioned himself to catch the child, his hands steady despite the thundering of his heart. Sarah's face was transformed with effort, a primal determination replacing the fear that had earlier clouded her eyes. "One more push," Running Eagle encouraged, seeing the baby's head emerge. "The child comes now." With a final guttural cry that echoed off the canyon walls, Sarah pushed, and the baby slid into Running Eagle's waiting hands, small, slippery, and undeniably alive. A boy, just as she had predicted, his tiny body perfect and complete, his lungs immediately filling with air to produce a robust wail. "Your son," Running Eagle said, his voice thick with emotion as he placed the infant on Sarah's chest. Sarah's exhausted face transformed with wonder as she cradled the newborn, tears mingling with the sweat on her cheeks. "William," she whispered, then looked up at Running Eagle. "Tabananika." Running Eagle felt something shift within his chest, a breaking and remaking. This child, born of white settlers but delivered by Comanche hands, represented something he had not dared to hope for, a bridge between worlds, a future not written in blood. Before he could second-guess himself, Running Eagle reached for the small pouch he kept at his waist. From it, he withdrew a mixture of sacred herbs and red ochre. With deliberate movements, he marked the infant's forehead with a small handprint, the same symbol painted on his own chest during raids, but with a profoundly different meaning now. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, curious rather than alarmed. "The protection ritual," Running Eagle explained softly. "Among my people, it is performed only for Comanche children. It asks the spirits to watch over him, to guide his steps, to make his heart strong and his mind clear." Sarah's eyes widened with understanding of the taboo he was breaking. "And if your people knew?" Running Eagle met her gaze steadily. "They would say I have forgotten who I am." He touched the baby's tiny hand, which curled reflexively around his finger. "Perhaps instead, I am remembering who I was meant to be." In the quiet of the canyon, as the stars wheeled overhead and the newborn's cries softened to contented murmurs, something sacred and dangerous was taking shape. A family formed not of blood or tradition, but of choice and circumstance, and the stubborn hope that the world could be remade anew. Running Eagle knew with bone-deep certainty that in performing the sacred ritual for this child, he had crossed a line from which there could be no return. Yet watching Sarah's face as she gazed at her son, he found he could not regret the path that had led him here. The weeks following William's birth unfolded in a rhythm of quiet tenderness and watchful vigilance. Each dawn found Running Eagle at the canyon entrance, scanning the horizon for signs of pursuit, while each sunset saw him returning to the shelter where Sarah nursed their son. For in his heart, if not by blood, Tabananica had become his. The baby thrived despite the harsh circumstances of his birth. His cheeks filled out, his cries grew stronger, and his dark eyes, so like his mother's in shape, though deeper in color, began to focus on the world around him. Sarah recovered her strength with remarkable swiftness, moving about the canyon with William strapped to her chest in a cradle board Running Eagle had fashioned from bent willow and soft deerskin. "He likes to see everything," Sarah observed one morning as the baby's head swiveled to follow a butterfly's path. "Just like his father." Running Eagle glanced up from where he was repairing a snare. James was curious about the world. A shadow passed over Sarah's face. Grief, never fully absent, making itself known again. "Yes," she said softly. He wanted to understand how everything worked, from steam engines to prairie grass. She adjusted the wrapping around William. "But I meant you." The words hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. Running Eagle felt their weight settle in his chest, a warmth that spread outward like ripples in still water. He had never considered fatherhood, at least not like this, not with a woman whose people had been enemies to his own for generations, not with a child who carried no drop of his blood, yet somehow reflected his spirit. "I am honored," he said finally, the English words feeling inadequate for the emotion behind them. In Comanche, he would have expressed it differently, with phrases that spoke of responsibility and pride, of a bond forged by choice rather than obligation. Sarah seemed to understand nonetheless. She smiled, the expression transforming her face in the dappled sunlight filtering through the cottonwood leaves. For a moment, Running Eagle saw her not as the desperate woman he had rescued from flames, nor as the determined survivor who had learned to live in the wilderness, but simply as a woman, beautiful, strong, alive with purpose. The realization disturbed him more than he cared to admit. That night, as William slept peacefully between them in the shelter, Running Eagle voiced the concern that had been growing alongside their strengthening bonds. "And we cannot stay here forever," he said, his voice low so as not to disturb the baby. "The canyon has served us well, but winter will come eventually, and the child needs more than we can provide here." Sarah's face, softened by firelight, grew serious. "Where would we go? Your people would kill me and take William. My people would hang you as a raider." She shook her head. There is no place for us out there. Running Eagle had been considering this problem for days, weighing options that all seemed to lead back to danger. There is a mission near San Antonio, he said finally, run by a priest who has shown kindness to both settlers and Indians. He might shelter us while we decide our next step. How far? Many days' journey, through country patrolled by both Comanche and the UAS. Cavalry. Running Eagle did not sugarcoat the dangers. We would need to travel carefully, mostly at night. Sarah was silent for a long moment, her fingers gently stroking William's tiny back. When I was a girl in Boston, she said finally, I once heard Frederick Douglass speak. He said freedom is not given, it must be taken. Her eyes met Running Eagle's across the small space. I want freedom for my son, Running Eagle. Freedom to grow up without hatred, without having to choose sides in a war he didn't start. Such a place may not exist, Running Eagle replied gently. Then we'll make one. The determination in her voice reminded him of the woman who had emerged from a burning cabin, shotgun in hand, unwilling to surrender to fate. The decision made, they spent the next days preparing for the journey. Running Eagle fashioned a more secure carrier for William that would allow Sarah to keep him close while leaving her hands free. They dried meat, gathered wild onions and berries, repaired clothing, and made water skins from rabbit bladders. On what would be their final evening in the canyon, Sarah asked Running Eagle to teach her more of his language. This had become a ritual of sorts. Each night, a few new words or phrases exchanged between them, building a shared vocabulary that was neither fully English nor Comanche, but something unique to their small family. How do you say thank you? She asked, sitting cross-legged by the fire, William sleeping peacefully in her lap. Yura, Running Eagle replied, but we do not say it often. Gratitude is shown through actions, not words. Sarah considered this. And I care for you? Running Eagle hesitated. The phrase she was asking for carried deeper connotations in Comanche than its English equivalent might suggest. Tsaku ma'ai, he said finally. It means, I hold you in my heart. Tsaku ma'ai, Sarah repeated carefully, her pronunciation improving with practice. She looked up at him, the firelight catching the gold flecks in her blue eyes. Running Eagle, Tsaku ma'ai. Something shifted between them in that moment. A boundary crossed, a possibility acknowledged. Running Eagle felt it like a physical touch. A hand pressed against his chest where the red handprint had once been painted. Sarah, he began, uncertain what would follow her name. But the moment was broken by a sound that froze the blood in his veins, the distant but unmistakable whinny of a horse, followed by the soft clink of metal against metal. Not the random noises of nature, but the deliberate sounds of men trying to move quietly and not entirely succeeding. Running Eagle was on his feet instantly, motioning for Sarah to remain silent. He moved to the canyon entrance, climbing swiftly to his lookout position. In the silver light of the quarter moon, he could make out shapes moving along the ridge opposite, 4, perhaps 5 riders, moving with purpose. His first thought was that his father's warriors had finally found them. But as he watched their movements, he realized these were not Comanche. The way they sat their horses, the bulky shapes of their firearms, these were white men, rangers perhaps, or cavalry scouts. Running Eagle descended quickly, returning to where Sarah waited, her face pale with alarm. We must leave now, he said, gathering their essential supplies. White men, on the ridge. They haven't found the entrance yet, but they're searching methodically. Sarah's arms tightened around William. How? How did they find us? It doesn't matter, Running Eagle replied, though the question troubled him as well. What matters is getting you and the child to safety. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, securing William in his carrier and gathering the supplies they had prepared. Within minutes, they were ready, the evidence of their long stay quickly obscured. Running Eagle led them not toward the main entrance, but to a narrow fissure in the canyon wall, a secondary exit he had discovered during his explorations, too small for a horse, but passable for humans on foot. "It will be difficult," he warned, "but it leads to a dry stream bed that will hide our tracks." Sarah nodded, her face set with determination. "Lead the way." As they slipped into the darkness, leaving behind the sanctuary that had sheltered them through birth and healing, Running Eagle felt a pang of loss. In that hidden canyon, they had created something precious and fragile. A family forged across the battle lines of history. Now they were venturing back into a world that had no place for such a family, where every hand might be turned against them. But looking at Sarah's resolute profile as she cradled William against her breast, Running Eagle knew there was no other choice. Together, they would find a way forward, or they would fall trying. There was no longer any path back to the lives they had once known. They traveled under the cover of darkness, resting during the heat of the day in whatever shelter they could find, a cluster of rocks, a dry wash, once even the hollowed trunk of a lightning-struck oak. William remained remarkably quiet throughout their journey, as if the infant somehow understood the need for silence. When he did fuss, Sarah would nurse him quickly, her body curved protectively around his tiny form while Running Eagle kept watch. The Texas summer showed no mercy. Days blazed with relentless heat that shimmered above the scrubland, while nights offered only modest relief. Water became their most precious resource, each sip measured carefully. Each spring or creek they encountered a blessing to be celebrated in whispers. On the fourth night, as they picked their way through a tangle of mesquite, Running Eagle froze, one hand raised in warning. Sarah immediately stilled, drawing William closer to her chest. Ahead, barely visible in the thin moonlight, the embers of a campfire glowed orange against the darkness. The murmur of voices carried on the night air, white men's voices, speaking English with the lazy drawl of Texas Rangers. Running Eagle signaled for Sarah to retreat, but as they turned, William let out a sudden, piercing cry. The voices at the campfire ceased abruptly. "You hear that?" one called out. "Sounded like a baby," another replied, disbelief coloring his tone. "Out here, you're loco, Patterson." "I know what I heard. Could be that woman they're looking for, the one taken during the raid." Running Eagle's heart hammered against his ribs. They had to move now before the Rangers could organize a search. He took Sarah's hand, guiding her through the dense underbrush as quietly as possible, away from the camp and toward a ridge he had spotted earlier. Behind them, lanterns flared to life. Men's voices called to one another as they began to spread out, searching for the source of the cry. William, perhaps sensing the danger, had fallen silent again, his tiny face pressed against Sarah's chest. They reached the base of the ridge, but the ascent looked impossibly steep in the darkness, a jumble of loose rock and sparse handholds. Running Eagle gauged Sarah's exhausted face, the baby strapped to her chest, and made a swift decision. "I will lead them away," he whispered. "You climb at the top, follow the ridge east until you reach a stand of cottonwoods. Wait for me there." Sarah's fingers tightened around his arm. "No. We stay together. Sarah, I won't lose you too." The fierce determination in her voice brooked no argument. "We climb. Together." Running Eagle wanted to protest, to insist that his plan made more tactical sense, but there was no time. The Rangers were drawing closer, their lanterns bobbing through the trees like vengeful spirits. Stay close, he conceded, beginning to pick his way up the slope, testing each handhold before committing his weight. Sarah followed, her movements made awkward by William's carrier, but her determination unwavering. Loose stones skittered down the slope beneath their feet, making more noise than Running Eagle would have liked, but the night wind helped to mask the sounds of their ascent. They were halfway up when William began to fuss again, his whimpers growing louder despite Sarah's attempts to soothe him. Below, a lantern paused, then began moving directly toward the base of the ridge. "They're up there," a voice called out. "I can hear the baby!" A shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off stone inches from Running Eagle's head. Sarah gasped, but didn't falter, continuing to climb with desperate energy. Running Eagle reached a small ledge and turned to help Sarah up beside him. In the glow of the lanterns below, he could see the strain on her face, the way her arms trembled with exhaustion. William's cries had grown more insistent, echoing off the rock face. "We can't outclimb them," Sarah panted, fear evident in her eyes. Running Eagle scanned their surroundings, looking for any advantage. The ledge they stood on extended around a bend in the ridge, disappearing from view of those below. It was their only chance. "This way," he urged, guiding Sarah along the narrow shelf of rock. As they rounded the bend, he spotted what he had hoped for. A shallow cave, little more than an indentation in the rock face, but deep enough to shield them from view. They pressed into the darkness of the recess, Sarah cradling William close, trying to quiet his cries. Running Eagle positioned himself at the entrance, knife drawn, ready to defend his family to the last breath. The word struck him with unexpected force. Family. That's what they had become, not captive and captor, not white woman and Comanche warrior, but a family bound by something stronger than blood or tradition. Below, the Rangers had begun to climb, but cautiously, hampered by darkness and unfamiliar terrain. Their curses echoed up the ridge as stones gave way beneath their boots. In the cramped confines of the cave, William's cries suddenly ceased. Running, Eagle glanced back to see the baby regarding him with solemn eyes that seemed too knowing for one so young. A tiny hand reached out, fingers opening and closing as if beckoning. Without thinking, Running Eagle extended his index finger. William grasped it with surprising strength, and in that simple contact, a covenant was sealed. Whatever came next, whatever sacrifices might be demanded, Running Eagle would protect this child, not because of a sacred ritual or a debt of honor, but because of love, pure and uncomplicated. Sarah's eyes met his over the baby's head, and he saw in them a reflection of his own feelings. Fear, yes, but also resolve, and something deeper that neither dared yet name. "They're turning back," he whispered, hearing the Rangers' voices grow more distant as they abandoned the difficult climb in favor of searching easier terrain. Sarah released a shuddering breath, resting her forehead against Running Eagle's shoulder. "Ah, we're going to make it," she murmured, half statement, half prayer. Running Eagle placed his free hand over hers, where it cradled their son. "Yes," he promised, "together." After 15 days of arduous travel, the whitewashed walls of Mission San Jose appeared on the horizon like a mirage shimmering in the heat. Sarah, her face bronzed by the sun and her body lean from weeks of hard journeying, paused at the crest of a small rise, William sleeping peacefully against her chest. "Is that it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might cause the vision to disappear. Running Eagle nodded, his own relief carefully contained. Mission San Jose. Father Santiago's place. They approached cautiously, well aware that safety was not guaranteed even here. The mission stood serenely in the late afternoon light, its bell tower casting a long shadow across the dusty courtyard. A few figures moved about, women hanging laundry, an old man tending a small garden, two young boys chasing a chicken. Running Eagle had visited this place once before, years ago, when he had been sent by his father to negotiate the release of Comanche children taken during a skirmish. Father Santiago had impressed him then with his fairness, his willingness to see beyond the blood-soaked history that divided their peoples. But that had been different. Running Eagle had come as the son of a chief, a representative of his tribe. Now he arrived as a fugitive, with a white woman and her half-blood child, a living embodiment of the very boundaries Father Santiago sought to bridge. At the edge of the mission grounds, Running Eagle touched Sarah's arm. "Let me approach first. Stay hidden until I signal." Sarah nodded, though her eyes betrayed her anxiety at their separation. Running Eagle walked toward the mission alone, his bearing proud despite his ragged appearance. He had discarded his breechcloth and leggings days ago, adopting instead a pair of trousers and a loose cotton shirt taken from an abandoned homestead. With his hair tied back and his face clean-shaven, he hoped to pass, at least at a distance, for Mexican rather than Comanche. A young novice spotted him first, calling out in Spanish. Running Eagle responded in the same language, asking to speak with Father Santiago on a matter of urgency. The boy hesitated, then scurried off toward the main building. Minutes later, a tall figure in a simple brown robe emerged. Father Santiago had aged since Running Eagle had last seen him, his beard now more gray than black, his shoulders slightly stooped. But his eyes remained clear and piercing, missing nothing. "I know you," the priest said quietly as he approached. "You are Thundercloud's son." Running Eagle inclined his head. "I was..." The priest's eyebrows rose at the distinction. "And now I am simply a man seeking sanctuary, not for myself alone." Father Santiago studied him for a long moment. The raid near Fort Griffin. There were rumors. A white woman taken, a Comanche warrior who betrayed his people. His gaze sharpened. "That was you." It wasn't a question, but Running Eagle answered anyway. "Yes, and the woman is with me, by choice, as is her son." The priest's weathered face revealed nothing of his thoughts. "Bring them," he said finally. "Whatever your story, night comes quickly, and these are dangerous times for those caught between worlds." Running Eagle signaled to Sarah, who emerged from her hiding place. William cradled protectively in her arms. As she walked toward them, head held high despite her exhaustion and uncertainty, Running Eagle felt a surge of pride. This woman had endured so much, had shown a courage that would have impressed even the most seasoned Comanche warrior. Father Santiago's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the baby, but he made the sign of the cross and beckoned them to follow him inside the mission walls. That night, after they had been fed, bathed, and given clean clothes, Father Santiago sat with them in his small study, listening without interruption as they told their story. Sarah speaking of the raid, of Running Eagle's unexpected mercy, of the weeks in the canyon, and the birth of her son, Running Eagle explaining his decision to protect her, the sacred ritual he had performed for William, their dangerous journey to the mission. When they finished, the priest was silent for a long while, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "What you have done," he said finally, looking at Running Eagle, "breaks every law of your people. I know." "And yet," the priest continued, his gaze shifting to include Sarah and the baby, "it honors a higher law, one of compassion, of seeing the humanity in those we are taught to call enemy." He sighed deeply. "I can offer you shelter for a time. Beyond these walls, both your peoples would condemn what you have become to each other. Here, at least, you may find a moment's peace." For 3 days, they knew a tentative tranquility. Sarah and William were given a small room in the women's quarters, while Running Eagle slept in a lean-to near the stables. During the day, they helped with the mission's work, Running Eagle mending fences and tending horses, Sarah assisting in the kitchen or the small infirmary. William became a favorite among the mission's residents, passed from arm to arm, cooed over by the women, blessed repeatedly by Father Santiago. In these quiet moments, Running Eagle allowed himself to imagine a future, not here at the mission, which could never be more than temporary sanctuary, but somewhere. Perhaps north, where settlements were newer and prejudices less entrenched, or west, toward California, where it was said many peoples mingled more freely. But on the 4th day, as Running Eagle was repairing the mission's well, a rider arrived in a cloud of dust. The man spoke urgently to Father Santiago, whose face grew grave as he listened. When the rider departed, the priest sought out Running Eagle immediately. "Word has reached the Comanche camps," Father Santiago said without preamble. "Your father knows you are here. He comes with 20 warriors to reclaim his son and dispense justice to the white woman who, he believes, has bewitched you." Running Eagle's hand tightened on the wooden handle of his shovel. "When?" "Tomorrow, perhaps the day after." The priest's eyes were troubled. "I cannot refuse him entry. This mission serves all who come in peace." "My father does not come in peace," Running Eagle said grimly. That evening, as stars appeared in the velvet sky above the mission, Running Eagle found Sarah in the small garden where she often walked with William after the day's heat had faded. She took one look at his face and knew. "They're coming," she said, not a question but a recognition of the inevitable. Running Eagle nodded. "My father, warriors loyal to him." Sarah's arms tightened around William, who gurgled happily, oblivious to the danger gathering around his small world. "What will we do?" Running Eagle looked out beyond the mission walls, toward the vast landscape that had shaped him, the land his ancestors had roamed freely before the whites came with their fences and their ownership papers. Then he looked back at Sarah and William, his family not by blood but by choice, by love, by the journey they had walked together. "I will meet with my father," he said with quiet certainty. Alone. Dawn broke with the somber gravity of a funeral drum. Running Eagle stood at the mission's eastern gate, watching the sun climb above the horizon in a spill of molten gold. He had spent the night in preparation, not sharpening weapons or planning strategies, but in the deeper preparation of a man facing the most important confrontation of his life. He had bathed in the small stream behind the mission, scrubbing away the dust of travel. From a bundle of his few possessions, he had taken out items long carried, but rarely used, a beaded headband that had been his grandfather's, a medicine pouch containing sacred herbs, the eagle feather given to him upon his first successful hunt. These he wore not as adornment, but as reminder of who he had been, of the heritage he had both honored and betrayed by his choices. Sarah had found him as he completed his preparations, William sleeping peacefully in her arms. No words passed between them, none were needed. She simply touched his face with her free hand, her eyes saying everything her voice could not. Running Eagle placed his palm over her hand, then bent to kiss William's forehead. Whatever happened this day, he wanted to carry the feeling of that touch, that kiss, into the confrontation to come. Father Santiago approached as the sun cleared the distant hills. "They have been spotted," the priest said quietly. "Perhaps 20 riders, moving with purpose." Running Eagle nodded. "I will meet them beyond the mission walls. This is not your battle, Father." The old priest's eyes were grave. "Every battle for the human heart is my battle, my son. But I understand. I will pray for wisdom to guide your words and your father's ears." As the dust cloud on the horizon grew larger, Running Eagle walked out alone to the small rise a quarter-mile from the mission. There he stood, neither armed nor armored save by conviction, waiting for the men who had once been his people. They came like a storm across the land, 20 warriors on horseback, their faces painted for confrontation, if not outright war. At their lead rode Chief Thundercloud, his massive frame draped in a blanket of red and black despite the summer heat, his long hair streaked with grey but still worn in the traditional style of a great chief. Flanking him were Black Knife and White Hawk, the two warriors who had been with Running Eagle on that fateful raid months ago. The warriors reined in their horses in a semicircle around Running Eagle, hooves pawing at the dry earth, creating a cloud of dust that seemed to blur the boundaries between them. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the breathing of horses, the creak of leather, the soft jingle of metal adornments. Then Chief Thundercloud dismounted, landing heavily on the ground before his son. Up close, Running Eagle could see the toll these months had taken on his father. New lines carved into his face, a weariness in his eyes that the stern set of his mouth could not disguise. "My son," Thundercloud said in Comanche, his voice like gravel underfoot. "Father," Running Eagle replied in the same tongue, inclining his head in respect. "You ran from your people," Thundercloud continued, anger simmering beneath the controlled surface of his words. "You betrayed your brothers in battle. You took a white woman as your own." His voice rose with each accusation. "You abandoned your birthright, your responsibility, your blood, for what? For the witch who has clouded your mind with her magic." Running Eagle did not flinch from the fury in his father's eyes. "There is no magic, no bewitchment," he said steadily. "Only a choice to see beyond the blood hatred that has consumed us for generations, a choice to protect an innocent woman and her unborn child." "Innocent?" Black Knife spat from atop his horse. "No white settler is innocent. Their very presence on our land is a crime." Running Eagle turned his gaze to the warrior. "And what of the child? What crime has he committed, save being born of two worlds that refuse to see each other as human?" A murmur passed through the assembled warriors. Children were sacred among the Comanche, their protection and nurturing a responsibility shared by the entire tribe. To harm a child was unthinkable, yet the children of enemies were often taken in raids, raised as Comanche, their original heritage deliberately erased. Thundercloud's eyes narrowed. "You performed the sacred protection ritual for this half-blood child," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "This I heard from those who followed your trail. Is it true?" Running Eagle met his father's gaze without wavering. "It is true." A collective intake of breath from the warriors. Such a ritual was reserved only for Comanche children, a blessing meant to connect them to the spirits of their ancestors, to the very soul of the people. To perform it for an outsider's child was sacrilege. "Then you have fallen further than I feared," Thundercloud said, his disappointment cutting deeper than any blade could have. "You are no longer my son, no longer Comanche." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. Running Eagle had expected them, had prepared himself for their impact, yet still they tore through him with physical force. To be cast out, to be named not Comanche, it was a death of identity, a severing from the taproot of his being. Yet even as pain lanced through him, another feeling rose to meet it: determination, clarity, the certainty of having chosen a difficult but necessary path. "I am still your son," Running Eagle said, his voice steady despite the emotion churning within him. "I still carry the blood of the people in my veins, but I have seen beyond the boundaries our hatred has drawn. He took a step toward his father, hands open at his sides. "Father, I have found a different kind of strength, not in war, not in vengeance, but in protecting those who cannot protect themselves. In loving across the divides we have built. Love." Thundercloud's laugh was harsh, brittle. "You speak of love for a white woman whose people have slaughtered ours, stolen our lands, driven the buffalo to the edge of extinction. I speak of love for Sarah, who has courage to match any Comanche warrior," Running Eagle replied. "For William Tabananica, who carries in his small body the blood of both our peoples and the hope for a different future." At the Comanche name given to a white woman's child, several warriors shifted uncomfortably on their horses. One, younger than the others, whispered something to his companion that earned him a sharp look from Black Knife. Thundercloud studied his son's face, searching for something, weakness, perhaps, or doubt. Finding neither, his expression hardened. "Bring the woman and the child," he commanded. "Let me see this miracle that has turned a Comanche warrior into a traitor." Running Eagle hesitated. To bring Sarah and William before the war party was to risk their lives on his father's unpredictable temper, yet to refuse would only confirm Thundercloud's suspicion that the white woman controlled him through fear or enchantment. Before he could respond, movement from the direction of the mission caught his eye. Sarah was walking toward them, William strapped to her chest in his carrier. Father Santiago walked beside her, one hand on her elbow as if to steady her, the other holding a wooden cross before him like a shield. Running Eagle's heart seemed to stop, then resume at double pace. This was not what he had planned, not the controlled confrontation he had envisioned. Sarah had placed herself and William directly in the path of danger. Yet as she drew closer, he saw the determination in her stride, the quiet dignity in the way she held herself. This was not the action of a frightened woman, but of one who had faced death and survival and understood the price of both. "There," Thundercloud said, pointing at the approaching figures. "The witch comes, drawn by the sound of her name. And she brings the half-blood with her." The warriors turned as one to look, some reaching instinctively for weapons before Thundercloud raised a hand to stay them. Sacred ground, sacred rules, even in his anger. The chief would not violate the ancient protocols that govern such confrontations. Sarah stopped a few paces away, close enough for her features to be clearly visible to the assembled warriors. William, awake now, peered out from his carrier with solemn dark eyes that seemed to take in everything, missing nothing. "I am Sarah Thornton," she said in clear, unfaltering English. "This is my son, William Tabananica." She met Thundercloud's fierce gaze without flinching. "Your son saved my life and the life of my child when he could have taken both. He taught me to survive in the wilderness, to speak words in your language, to understand something of your ways." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "I did not bewitch him. I loved him for his compassion, his strength, his willingness to see me as a person, not an enemy." Father Santiago translated her words into Comanche, though from the narrowing of Thundercloud's eyes, it was clear the chief understood enough English to grasp their meaning. "Love," Thundercloud repeated, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "You claim to love my son." Sarah nodded, her gaze unwavering. "As he loves me, as we both love this child." Thundercloud's expression betrayed nothing as he moved closer, studying William with penetrating intensity. The baby returned his gaze with equal solemnity, then did something unexpected. He smiled, a toothless, guileless grin that transformed his tiny face. A ripple of murmurs passed through the warriors. Among the Comanche, a baby's smile was considered a powerful sign, an indication that the spirits looked favorably upon the child. White Hawk, who had remained silent until now, spoke up suddenly. "The boy has the look of the people," he observed. "His eyes, his spirit. He is neither white nor Comanche. Running Eagle said. He is both. As the future must be, if any of us are to survive the changes coming to this land. Thundercloud stood motionless, his weathered face revealing nothing, as William continued to smile up at him, tiny hands reaching toward the chief's eagle feather. The warriors watched in tense silence, their horses shifting restlessly beneath them, mirroring the unease of their riders. A child of two worlds, Thundercloud finally said, his voice softer than before. Like the dawn, neither night nor day, but something between. He looked from William to Running Eagle, then to Sarah. Our shaman once told me of a vision, of children with mixed blood who would carry our ways forward when the old paths were gone. I did not believe him. Running Eagle felt something shift in the air around them. Not surrender, not exactly acceptance, but perhaps the first fragile tendril of understanding. Father, he said, switching to English so Sarah could understand, I did not choose this path to dishonor you or our people. I chose it because I could not watch more death, more hatred. The future comes whether we welcome it or not. I want to build one where William can know both sides of his heritage with pride. Thundercloud's gaze lingered on his son's face. You speak as a chief would, he said finally. With vision beyond the moment, he turned to the assembled warriors. My son has not been bewitched, he has been transformed as the caterpillar becomes the butterfly, different yet carrying the essence of what came before. Black Knife edged his horse forward. Chief, the council will hear my words. Thundercloud interrupted firmly. The world changes around us. Perhaps it is time we changed with it, not in surrender, but in wisdom. He looked once more at William, who had now fallen asleep against Sarah's chest, his momentary excitement giving way to peaceful slumber. You cannot return to the people, Thundercloud said to Running Eagle, his tone carrying the weight of finality. The old ones would not permit it, and I cannot overrule their judgment in this. His eyes, however, held a glimmer of something Running Eagle had not seen before, respect tinged with sorrow. But neither will I name you enemy. He reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew a small object, a carved stone bear, the chief's personal medicine token, worn smooth by decades of handling. This he pressed into Running Eagle's palm. My father gave this to me, as his father gave it to him, Thundercloud said. It carries the strength of our line. Give it to your son. He glanced at Sarah. To William Tabernanica, when he is old enough to understand its meaning. Running Eagle closed his fingers around the token, the magnitude of the gesture not lost on him. This was not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but something perhaps more valuable, acknowledgement. A thread of connection maintained despite all that had been broken. The people will not trouble you, Thundercloud continued. I give my word as chief, but you must make your own way now. This mission cannot be your home. It lies too close to our hunting grounds, too near the borders of memory. We understand, Running Eagle replied, inclining his head in respect. Thundercloud turned to Sarah, studying her with eyes that had seen a century of change wash over the plains like a relentless tide. You have won the heart of my son, he said in halting English. Guard it well. Teach your child of his father's people, so that something of us remains when the last Comanche rides into the sunset. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I will, she promised. He will know of his grandfather, the great chief Thundercloud, and of the proud people who ruled these lands. Something like approval flickered across the chief's stern features. He mounted his horse with the fluid grace of a much younger man, then raised his hand in a gesture that was both benediction and farewell. May the road rise to meet you, he said, the traditional blessing of the Comanche carrying across the morning air. Then, with a sharp command to his warriors, he wheeled his horse and galloped away, the war party following in a cloud of dust that lingered long after they had disappeared over the horizon. 3 days later, as dawn painted the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold, a small wagon stood ready in the mission courtyard. Father Santiago had provided them with supplies for the journey: food, blankets, a few tools, and letters of introduction to colleagues at missions farther west. California, the old priest had suggested. The Spanish settlements there are more accustomed to people of mixed heritage. You might find a place where your family can put down roots without the shadow of old hatreds following you. Running Eagle helped Sarah into the wagon, where William lay sleeping in a cradle fashioned from a wooden crate lined with soft deerskin. The baby had thrived in the days since the confrontation, as if sensing that some great obstacle had been overcome. "Are you ready?" Running Eagle asked, taking up the reins of the 2 mules Father Santiago had gifted them. Sarah looked back at the mission, then toward the western horizon, where their future waited, unmapped and uncertain but full of possibility. "Yes," she said, her hand finding his. Our journey is just beginning." As the wagon rolled away from Mission San Jose, Father Santiago made the sign of the cross, his lips moving in silent prayer for the small family venturing into the unknown. They would face hardships, he knew, prejudice, danger, the 1,000 natural challenges of frontier life, but they carried with them something stronger than all these obstacles: the courage to forge a new path where none had existed before. 5 years later, the small adobe house stood on a gentle slope overlooking a valley lush with vineyards and orchards. Roses climbed the whitewashed walls, their blossoms nodding in the warm California breeze. In the yard, a boy of 5 with dark hair and serious eyes practiced with a tiny bow, his arrow falling well short of the target, but his determination unwavering. "Again, Papa?" William called, looking to where Running Eagle, now known in the community as Thomas Eagle, worked mending a saddle beneath the shade of an oak tree. "Patience, Tabananica," Running Eagle replied with a smile. "The bow must become part of your arm, not just something in your hand." From the doorway, Sarah watched them, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their second child grew. Her face, tanned by the California sun, bore the contentment of a woman who had traversed fire and wilderness to find her home. Here, in this place between worlds, they had found their peace. Not perfect, not without struggle, but hard-won and precious. Their children would grow knowing both the ancient wisdom of the Comanche and the changing world of the white settlers, carrying forward the hope that understanding might eventually replace hatred, that love might prove stronger than the divisions of history. And somewhere on the distant Texas plains, an aging chief still told the story of his son who had found a different kind of courage, the courage to break with the past and build a future where new paths could be forged from the ashes of the old.